Okay, well, we are live on Twitch. Oh, here we go. And we are also live on YouTube. Okay, well, we are. Yeah. So hopefully we're making it, although my screen on YouTube isn't fantastic, but hey ho, I'm not as clever as Rocco. So welcome everybody to this evening's version of Biddle. It's going to be a slightly different one because we are Rocco-less tonight. He's at a family wedding and apparently won't get home until we've all finished. So myself and Dan will try and do as good a job as Rocco does. So how is everybody this evening? All okay?
Yeah, good.
Doing well.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Good, Zeb. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. A little bit nervous, but I know it sounds silly because I'm normally there with Rocco anyway, but he's the expert. I'm just the guy in the background making noises. So we have Kubuntu 1904 as the distro challenge this week. So we're just going to take the people as they are on the stream. So Adam, would you mind being first?
Sure. Kubuntu. It's Ubuntu. It's KDE. I didn't notice much of a difference between like from 1904 to like 1810 and all that. I mean, I know there's newer versions of Plasma and everything, so that's more of a Plasma thing. But Kubuntu itself, I mean, I think it's solid. I think it's fine. Just boring, I guess, which is fine by me.
All right, cool. Anything else that struck you as being particularly good, or it's just there and it works and it's not GNOME?
Well, the fact that it works like consistently is enough for me. So, yeah.
Nice. Dan, what did you make of Kubuntu?
I really like Kubuntu. I think it's a well done Plasma for sure. All the KDE apps that you get with it too are pretty fantastic. I mean, nothing to complain about there. They really work, and it's a nice polish. The theming is good in Kubuntu. I'm super happy with it. When I run, it feels comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it takes some getting used to. A lot of people complain about all the settings and how many there are and where they are. Sometimes is a little confusing, and it takes some getting used to, I think, to get there. But once you get used to it, it's not so bad. And out of the box, I think Kubuntu does a lot of things right, so that you don't have to go searching for those. You can run it, in its standard configuration and be quite happy. So, and it's very solid. I'm running it on another machine over here, and I leave it running most of the time on Kubuntu. I do have a couple other distros on there too, but it's one that's resident most of the time for me. So definitely solid.
Cool, nice. Thanks very much. Chris, have you had a chance in your busy week to try Kubuntu?
I got it installed. Didn't really have issue with the install. I got the usual stuff that I put on there, like Lazarus and the snap pack for what's the chat we use? Discord. Yeah, that's right. And didn't have an issue with it. Didn't really have the time to play with it like I wanted to. Like I wanted to really start getting into the desktop manager and stuff like that. But I haven't. This week was a hell week at work, and so I'd come home and I'd be putting my head on the pillow and falling asleep right away, and just didn't really have a chance to play with it.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, Mr. Positive, what have we got to say about Kubuntu?
All right, well, right out of the gate, it's Ubuntu, so it pretty much works on any hardware I've tried. So what I like right out of the gate, they use a dark theme by default. Beautiful. They use just the standard Breeze dark, so it looks nice. It's a very clean, light feel. I feel like they don't clutter the desktop with anything. They didn't clutter your applications, so it's just kind of a good install. I could really get along just fine in Kubuntu. I mean, it's not OpenSUSE, but I could get along fine in Kubuntu. I think it's a lot better than actually what I was expecting. And I don't know what I was expecting exactly, but it was a lot. I was very pleasantly surprised on how happy of a Plasma experience it was for me. Mm-hmm. Now, a couple things I didn't care for. Two exactly. The application launcher by default. I don't like the application launcher as much as the application menu. I know it's kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but I find the application menu, it's a little bit more old school, and it just kind of it speaks better to my inner geek. So yep. I prefer that. And really the only other thing is it doesn't have zipper. But other than that, it's great. No complaints. It's it's a job well done. It was very stable. It's great. So I really could get along just fine in Kubuntu. So.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, quick question: is the default menu the one where you click on the menu, then you'll click on Internet or Games or Office, and then you actually get down to the applications? It seems to be a few extra clicks to get to stuff.
Yeah, I think it kind of has a fancy scrolling thing. It's probably fine for some people. It's just not for me. I like, and honestly, I'm gonna hit the super key and type anyway, so I kind of want my menu to be a little bit more Spartan, I guess.
Yeah, and well, me personally, I tend to use Rudder, and so you just click on an empty spot on your desktop, start typing.
Even with the default launcher, it lets you configure like what's shown by default, so you can have it to where it just shows you like your list of applications without having to go into any of those categories. Like, it's fairly flexible.
It is. But like Nate, I usually change it as well.
I've never actually played with it, so that's I'm going to write that down right now, Mr. Clayton.
There you go.
Just use the other menu option. It's smaller anyway. It's better.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, but I like to play with it anyway. Just
it's good to experience.
Work around with it. See what I can see.
Okay.
And then tell you later I don't like it still.
That's fair.
Vash, you're up.
All right. Well, I mean, we have Cubicle Nate breaking the news. OpenSUSE is not Kubuntu, so that is always good to hear. But I didn't get a whole lot of chance to mess with Kubuntu this week, but I have been using it since shortly after the update hit. I upgraded from 18.10 to 1904. So I personally think a lot of the defaults that Kubuntu has are among the best defaults for KDE. So that works out pretty well. To me, it just makes things a bit easier and simpler for somebody that's not as familiar with the KDE settings. And I haven't dived into them overly much, but that is my one drawback with KDE is just there's so many settings and so many menus that those settings are in. But it does obviously give you a lot of flexibility. But yeah, I don't really know of a whole lot that's actually new beyond the apps and whatnot. I didn't really look too closely at the release notes or anything though. So I could be wrong there, but I'm sure it's just new KDE version, new apps, and whatever other refinements they got to make. But it's been running really well. I've been running Kubuntu on this ThinkPad basically since I got it. So it's been a pretty standard secondary PC for me.
Awesome. Good to hear. Tony, you there?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you think of Kubuntu?
I've always had a soft spot for KDE, but it takes about 4 days to get all the settings done. And it's a pain. I had it running for a couple of days, and I discovered that every time the computer went to sleep and woke up, I got a pop-up saying there was a graphical error and it had to reset. And when I tried using the Latte dock, it worked fine until the computer went to sleep, and when it woke up, it had this graphical error problem. The Latte dock had a white bar right across it, and you could hover over your icons and they're still there, but in order to get rid of the white bar, you had to click and open everything in the dock. And then as soon as it goes to sleep again, repeat. So as Seb would say, it was a case of next, and I moved on to something different. But I did like it, and the Discover Center is a lot better than it was the last time I tried it. I didn't have any problems with that. If I could sort out the graphical error and perhaps get the latte dock to work properly, it could become a daily driver for me.
Cool. By any chance, are you running NVIDIA, or do you have, what do you have for a graphics card?
It's an NVIDIA GT 730, I believe.
Okay. So I wonder if that's, did you install the proprietary drivers, or did you just run with the Nouveau ones?
The system installed the proprietary drivers. I think they're a later version than they were. The same as I've used on other distros, and I've never had any problems. But with KDE, there was obviously an issue of some description, and I'm unfortunately, Zeb says he's not very technical, but I'm even less technical than Zeb. I can do certain things, but if it gets too complicated, then I'd probably tend to move on to something that's easier and hopefully works better.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Eris, you're up next.
Well, I'll start off with my issue with Kubuntu. The only issue I have really with Kubuntu is that there's no dual boot option for Kubuntu. The installer doesn't show it. I think that's always been available in the other GTK flavors, and that's always been an issue just for like new users to start using Kubuntu, I think. As far as suggestions for the distro, I think they should use Thunderbird instead of KOffice, in the same way they use LibreOffice. And for Snap compatibility, since they ship Snap, I think they should have Wait Out Dark as an option. And I also think they should get rid of Show Desktop, instead put on Minimize All. I think that's a better option than Show Desktop. And I'll finish off with the things I do like about Kubuntu, which is they finally fix it so they don't ask you for password like in the past. Whenever you set up a new password, the K-wallet will always pop up in the past. I think they finally fixed that. There's also less screen tearing. And I don't know what they did, if that's just Plasma, but there's almost perfect no screen tearing now.
Magic.
Yeah, that's probably updated KWin. Yeah.
And I love that they have the backports option for Kubuntu for both the interim releases and the LTS. And I really appreciate the defaults, like double click for the file manager by default. You're gonna have to set that up. And I think that's about it.
Cool. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Cool. Nice. Okay, Mr. Green Screen, Eric Adams, how are you this evening?
Being a dork and playing with the green screen. I couldn't help it. Well, I use Kubuntu and I have been using it since 1804. So for me, really, it's interesting to hear everybody say that there's too many settings or there are lots of things to change. I install Kubuntu and there is almost nothing I change because I really like the defaults, and I think everybody has a desktop out there for them, or a distro that tweaks the desktop a certain way, and for me, Kubuntu just does it right. And so for me, what I like about Plasma, what I like about KDE is, let's say there was something that I wanted to change. In other systems, I find it difficult sometimes to get it the way I want it to be. So if there was some small change I wanted to make, even though, again, some people complain there's too many settings, to me, it's a benefit. It's a strength, because if that one setting that I need is there, and I can change it in 10 seconds and be done with it, that's great. That's a strength to me. Because I've been using Kubuntu consistently since 1804 and had already been using 1904, I decided to jump ahead, and I'm actually running 1910 daily now, just to kick the tires and give any kind of feedback. And so far I haven't found anything I'm running all my normal workflows and everything's working perfectly. So I'm expecting a pretty solid release coming up. And if I find anything, I'll report back to the team. I found a couple little changes that maybe they're just things that are sort of in flight, in progress. So, but otherwise, again, I get that a lot of people maybe don't like KDE or Plasma or prefer a GTK desktop. I get it. There's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise, but for me, it works, and it works perfectly all the time and has for quite a while. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. It's interesting you say you're on the 1910 because so am I, because I had a slight hiccup with my 1904 install. I watched a video by Ghosty where he was talking about Clear Linux or Clear OS, and I thought, oh, I'll have some of that, and just whacked it on a USB, chucked it in the machine, installed it, and then went, oh, there goes my Kubuntu install. I put it on the wrong partition. So I went and installed the 1910, which now apparently has the NVIDIA drivers baked into the ISO. So for an offline install, you can get it done. So that was all cool.
Yeah, and I will say that you've probably heard me complain before, with this laptop, this Dell XPS with the hybrid graphics, 1050 Ti, 1910 and 1904 as well, but 1910 also just flawless. It's the right driver, boot in. I don't leave it on NVIDIA. I switch to Intel just so it runs cooler. And that's all I ever have to do.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right, Colin, not seen your Kubuntu video yet. Where are you slacking, son?
No, I've been on other videos that I've been doing the Ubuntu one, so that's kept me busy for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've missed Ubuntu and Kubuntu, but I'll probably get around to them. But I was testing Kubuntu on my Toshiba laptop, which has got an Optimus video card. I did have a problem with when you drag the window up to full screen and full screen a window, it actually paused for about 20 seconds or so. So I'd have to think that's the Optimus card playing up on that. So I've put it on the desktop, which is AMD, and it's not a problem. So with the Toshiba laptop, it actually, under Intel, it did not have that error. So that was just an interesting little error for that. Must be just an NVIDIA issue. So, and the one thing I've noticed on this one here, I was running Latte Dock, and then I didn't want to run Latte Dock. So I went to the auto start and so forth and disabled Latte Dock, but it just keeps starting. So I had to actually uninstall it. So is that a thing? Or, I mean, I tried other things on auto start and they were working, switched them off. They didn't start, but Latte Dock just kept starting. So I don't know whether that's somehow integrated in the system or not. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I didn't have to install it, but I uninstalled it so it wouldn't keep coming up. So I don't know why that is. Other than those two particular issues, Kubuntu just runs. It's a nice looking distro. I like the fact that it has alternative menus that you can mess around with. Didn't tweak too much these days. I'm just, when I set up a desktop now, it just pretty much looks like a Windows environment because that's what I'm used to. If I'm running the GNOME desktop, then I'll probably I can adapt to that. But Ubuntu's pretty nice anyway. It's got some really good things about it. I'm running it now, actually. I installed Zoom and also Telegram to see how they look and function. I think they were both, one was Flatpak, one was Snap, I think. So they're all running well. It's running well now. So I would probably not expect anything else, but for it to run pretty well anyway. So I'm pretty happy with it. I still don't know whether I can just run Plasma on a regular basis. I just don't know.
Yes.
So, cool. It's
yes.
And Colin, what do you normally run? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I've been running Linux Mint Cinnamon for the longest time now. I'm looking at changing, but I'm probably going to be looking at Ubuntu Budgie because I like the Budgie desktop a little bit. It's got a good paradigm. I do like Plasma, but I just, for some reason, just get bored with it. after a while. But I haven't tried the actual KDE Connect yet. Is it KDE Connect? It is, isn't it? Yeah.
That's
KDE Connect is one of the best things on Linux, period.
Yeah, that might sell it to me, I think, but we'll see how we go with that.
Connect on anything actually, but it's the integration is much smoother on Plasma, but you can technically do it on anything.
Okay. Yeah, I'm yet to try that.
Terminal command to get it to work in other desktops, and it's not too bad. Just got to understand how KDE Connect works in the back end. I did it with MX.
Okay. Oh yeah, sure. All right. I thought it was called GS Connect on other desktops, or was that just the GNOME desktop?
That's just GNOME. GS is GNOME Shell. And so it's still KDE Connect in the back end. It's just the front end that you're using is GS Connect because app indicators don't work on GNOME, so they had to build a custom thing to make it work because GNOME. But otherwise, if it has anything that supports app indicators like Mate or Cinnamon or whatever, can use KDE Connect without doing anything super special. I think MX Linux, because of XFCE version of MX Linux, should probably be able to do it without a lot of effort. But some of the DEs like GNOME require special things. But it's still KDE Connect on the back end, and it's still the KDE Connect app on Android.
Runs pretty great on LXQt, Lubuntu. Just saying.
Nice.
Oh, sure. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that's my experience, Zeb. So yeah, it's pretty good. I've got nothing really bad to say about it anyway. So it's
good. Thanks very much indeed. So
no worries.
Chicken, what have you been doing with Kubuntu this week?
Well, I mean, I've been kind of just throwing some rocks at it, kind of seeing how it stands up to my terrible practices, and things have been pretty good so far. I think one of the things that I really appreciated was the vaults feature function thingy. The vaults system works a lot better than it did in 1804 and previous releases. It's much more stable now, and it doesn't like lose stuff, which was a problem for a bit. So this is nice. It's really good. And it's really easy to use. So I think it's definitely something that's going to make saving things securely more convenient for normal users, which is something that everybody should have. So it's good stuff.
Cool. No, and how did it cope with your massive video that you normally do? Like sort of, what was it you said, I think on Telegram? Anything normally from 15 to 50 gig files?
Typically, yeah, for about maybe 40 minutes of footage, which is a little excessive, but it gives me a lot of like. It's
a little excessive.
Yeah,
it's a little excessive.
And it copes all right with that, or have you not done anything?
Yeah, no, everything's worked all right. Actually, one of the things that I really liked was Dolphin's really good about just kind of being able to do anything you want it to do. It can be a little annoying to kind of configure sometimes. I find that sometimes I'm just not happy kind of fiddling with it, but it definitely doesn't struggle when it comes to file operations and stuff. It's almost like they were smart enough not to have it rely only on Dolphin for the file transfer, and it doesn't just hang up your entire file browser. Crazy.
Cool. Sounds interesting. All right, so let's see if the wonderful Barbara put it on any of her machines this week.
Yes, I did. I actually installed it. Yes, installed it. Bare metal. Woohoo! I have a T420, which I think is getting a little bit long in the tooth. So I thought, I'll put it on there. A couple of the keys are kind of weird. They're like falling off. Anyway, so I use that now as my test machine. I installed it. It installed perfectly. And the thing about when Aris said that you couldn't set it up for dual boot, I could do that, and I had no problems. I installed it, and the first time I had Ubuntu Mate on one partition on the same drive, on one partition, and then Kubuntu on the other. It worked perfectly. Then I said, okay, let me just wipe off Ubuntu Mate and see what I get, and it worked perfectly. So that way, it does work correctly. If you just kind of go through where it has guided install or something, guided partitioning, and you choose the right one. It won't be a problem. And so that was, the installation went perfectly. It saw my network, it sees everything. One weird thing that did happen was I go through, I install it, and then I reboot, no problem. But I got it. It wasn't screen tearing. It was like getting all these little, rather large pixelated areas on the screen. And that's happened before in the last, and not with, I mean, that happened with Ubuntu Mate, but it was only on a specific machine. It was my old XPS 17, and I think the video cards were kind of getting old. And that may be the same problem with this, because if I rebooted it, it was, and then, I rebooted it again, and it was fine. But once in a while, if I would reboot it, it would still give me these weird little, well, rather large pixelated areas. And if I tried to use a screen print to get it, tried to do a screenshot, I couldn't. It would just, as I moved off that one window that was having the problem, everything went back to normal. So I don't know, it could be my video card on that machine. It's the Intel integrated graphics. So it could be that it's just old. Could be the machine is, old. So I wasn't too worried about that. Everything else on it seemed to work really nicely. In terms of configuring it, you can configure it any way you want. And I think for some people that could be rather daunting. It's kind of like, there are too many choices. But I actually like that because I could get it to set it up to exactly the way that I like to work. It was fast and it was speedy and good response on that rather old laptop. I thought it was really, really nice. So let me just check my notes here. I had no problems with it. It did take me a bit to get used to just the way Kubuntu, the way the KDE desktop is, and having to find things. But I could find everything. All the programs worked. I could get to my file server, which sometimes that seems to be a problem with some distros. No problem, it saw everything. And I had another computer turned on, and it actually saw the drive that I have as a shared drive, if I want to pick something off of that. So I really was pleased with it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Picking up on something you said with the installer, I think what Aris was on about, because like you, I then go down and pick the manual installer and tell it what partitions to use. I think what Aris was on about, and somebody will have to correct me if I'm wrong, is there no option that just says install alongside your existing
yes, there
OS?
Is. It's the second option.
Right, okay.
And so what I did, and that's the one that it defaults to, at least it did on mine, it defaulted to that the first time. And so I said, okay, I'll do it that way. And it worked fine. And then Ubuntu Mate worked fine when I rebooted with that. So that is in there as an option. I didn't notice it immediately, and then I started to really read it. And I think part of it is that that's in the opposite order of the way Ubuntu Mate does it. Ubuntu Mate does, do you want to install next to the existing OS? And then, wipe the whole drive type of thing. Whereas this does it the other way. So the options were in a different order.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
I think the only issue with things like that, if you're doing multiple Ubuntu-based systems, is it can be difficult to choose the right entry because we still haven't solved the problem of Kubuntu not saying Ubuntu or Ubuntu Mate not saying Ubuntu. So hopefully one day.
Standards must be
kind of
conformed.
guess. You have to know what order they got installed in when you want to go choose. But yeah, I really liked it. I was very, doesn't mean I'm going to go off from Mate. I'm going to stay with that. But I think it's an excellent choice for people. And it is solid and it's stable. And that's important.
It's funny you should say that though, Shikin, because I think I asked Alan Pope that same question, that if you've tried every Ubuntu out there, they're all Ubuntu. And it's because they take the same, I never know whether it's upstream or downstream, but they just take the files from Ubuntu, and Ubuntu calls itself Ubuntu, and none of them, I don't know if they're not allowed to or they don't bother to name the distribution. So everything, you've just got 6, maybe 7 Ubuntu's installed.
I think because it's kind of part of like the core function of the OS. So like things like the bootloader are such kind of significant.
They share it. I believe he said they all share the same one. That's why they can't rename. I think something like that anyway. But I normally write down the device name so I know, because the device name always comes up on the grub screen. But then if you write down which one's which, you can't get them wrong.
There's another option. Just use Kubuntu and nothing else. Problem solved.
you know you can't just go into etc. LSB release and edit the description line.
Sounds
and
awful.
then just it's actually really easy, and it breaks nothing. Just edit the description line.
Yeah.
And nothing else, because if you edit anything else, you risk breaking something. Just edit that line, run sudo update grub or grub update or whatever it is, and next time you reboot, you'll see it in your bootloader that it says something different.
And then the next time you get an update that happens to renew LSB release, you got to do the whole thing again.
Yes, but if you know what package it's in that gets updated from that, which it's in the package base files, then you know when you have to do that. Or you can just run chatter-i/etc/LSB release, and it will never get changed.
Or just use Kubuntu.
Or just use a single operating system in general.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Or take the risk of breaking something. That sounds like more fun.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm way past that point. I just want it to turn it on and it works so I can get stuff done. Yeah, I've become boring.
That's okay. Boring is sometimes good.
Yep, it's reliable.
All right, Thomas. I know you've been busy, but what's your take?
Well, I didn't get to try it very much, but what I can say is I don't like Dolphin. I do not.
Why?
It's because there's no right-click open as root, right?
That's part of the reason, but not all of it. The other part of the reason is because it's organized in a way that I'm not used to, so it takes me forever to figure out where things are. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just doesn't work with my workflow.
But that's not against Dolphin. That's just it's not your familiarity. So it's like
right.
That's not a knock against Dolphin. Maybe.
That's what I'm not knocking against it. It's just why I don't like it. It's just a personal thing.
So the layout is what.
And you can reconfigure Dolphin to be whatever you want.
You can change the layout.
Yeah, I could probably change the layout. I just didn't have enough time to actually do that because I've been busy doing with other things this week.
Gotcha.
So,
like click,
otherwise,
drag.
Okay. Nothing else, huh? Nope.
Yeah, nothing else. I was in it for all of 20 minutes. So.
All right, it's fair.
Well, I have to say, when using Dolphin myself, when you go into network and all that, it's a little bit strange, the selections there, because there's a lot more selections compared to a lot of other file managers. So it works. It's just that
you can do more because it's better.
Yeah. The thing that got me, it took me a good 5 minutes just to figure out where I can do right-click open as terminal. And when I figured out finally how to do that, I was like, I feel like an idiot now.
Or you could just hit F4.
Yeah, just hit F4.
Like Michael says, it's just the familiarity that I'm not with Dolphin, so because I don't use it a lot. So
yeah, that's what I found. But it's easy enough to get used to it, or just if you don't like it, just change the file manager.
I completely agree with that. I just read an article, and I'm going to have to find the link for it, but it was basically like, GNOME and KDE and other desktops have gotten to a point where they are so solid, and we were like talking like about the littlest things and how you just sort of get used to one and you like it. That becomes how you use a computer. And changing away from that, you can appreciate when something is different and maybe it's innovative or it has a setting that maybe you like or is a way that you can use it. But ultimately, I think you just sort of, and I will say as I've gotten older, this is certainly true. Like I just sort of, I want it to just work the way I want it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I love the fact that everybody, we have these choices, right? And it's, like Anna's in the chat saying that it drives her crazy that all of those settings. And I completely get that. Like for someone who likes that GNOME, just straight up, file manager, like Colin, like you're saying, this is the way I'm used to it. This is the way it looks. Thomas, it's just laid out a certain way. I get it. And that's how I feel about Kubuntu and KDE and Dolphin in particular. And I'm sure Michael's going to tell us all about how you can rearrange all the panels and everything, but
then you have to make sure that you do that every time if you for some reason don't end up saving your config files. And that's kind of a pain.
Yeah, but I think you could say that's true for tiling window managers, like saving your config is sort of, once you get something the way it is, and you shouldn't have the expectation that it will be that way permanently, especially if there's going to be a new version of something, and Thomas brings up the point about being able to change files and customize things and then potentially having them overwritten or ways around that. If that's how you roll and that's how you're going to run your desktop, then you have to be responsible for it.
Well, and Monte's a prime example of that too, right? Because you have different layouts that you can pick. And if you do a fresh install or whatever, it's not going to be the layout that you had before. No. So you have to go in
and I'll also throw out there, if Farron OS's next OS Next, which is still very alpha beta / beta at this point, he's done that. He has some where it'll rearrange panels and do things like that. So it's certainly possible to do all that. And I think Michael made at one point, there was the argument of why did Ubuntu pick GNOME over KDE whenever you can make KDE look exactly like Unity. I'm not going to get into that, but that's the point. Is that I think KDE has that ability to be all things to all people. Whether you have the patience and the interest to make it that is really up to you.
Yeah, I reckon he's going to do some awesome things with that. I'm really keeping an eye on that.
Yep. Cool. All right, Michael. Any chance you tried Plasma?
I have nothing to say.
You mean I haven't got to start my stopwatch and stop?
No,
me
I'm
after
kidding.
5
I'm kidding.
minutes?
I have like 1,000 things. Let's go.
No, hang on. Let's
go.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I can address everything, every complaint everybody has. Not right now because I don't remember all of them. But you can basically adjust everything, and I understand whether that's a problem. But the reason why Kubuntu is the choice for people to use is because all of the absolutely terrible, ridiculously bad choices for defaults that Plasma has are addressed in Kubuntu. So like the double clicking, as mentioned earlier, not having that by default is ridiculous, and Kubuntu has that. And the dark theme for the panels and the menus and everything like that, Kubuntu has that. So Kubuntu has, there's a few things that I want to change still, but for the most part, they've changed all the things that I did not like, and they're very open to community input as well. So that's a huge bonus to them, because there's a lot of distros that were like, this is what we think, and this is the only way we're going to do it, and that kind of thing. But Kubuntu is totally, if you have a suggestion and you can give a reason why you think this is a better option, they might even change it to default. And they're currently working on new stuff that I've suggested for 1910, which should become, I don't know if when they've added it, but it will come out probably like in the next month or so for the actual like changes in the dailies. But as far as like, obviously when it comes out is October, but whatever. So I've been using Kubuntu for years, and it's the best example for people who have never used Plasma before and don't want to learn all of the extra stuff that you need to do for Plasma. So if your complaint is about Plasma specific stuff, I totally get it. There is some Plasma problems for sure, but Kubuntu has addressed a lot of the stuff, and they're willing to address anything that you have to bring up to them. That's the best thing about Kubuntu, is that they are willing to listen, and they're willing to make changes to benefit the overall ecosystem. And so if for anybody here who's like sees a problem that they would want to be fixed, just contact the Kubuntu people in the Telegram group or whatever, and the IRC or however you want, and they will actually listen. So I think that's the best comment I could really say, other than Kubuntu is the greatest distro ever. But I do think that there are some complaints for it that are valid, but most of them are Plasma related complaints, not necessarily Kubuntu related complaints. And I know that is like, just grasping at straws type thing, because most people can't really tell the difference between what's a Plasma thing, what's a Kubuntu thing, because the whole point of Kubuntu is to be a Plasma based thing. But with that said, I do think that Kubuntu could have some improvements, but for the most part, it's pretty much there. Has anybody tried the minimal install when you set it up?
I was thinking about doing that, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay. I didn't do that this time, but I've done that before.
Okay, well, I have just one little question related to that. Do you think that K3B should be included in the minimal install, or should it be taken out? And if you don't know what K3B is, it's basically an ISO CD burner ripper
DVD
thing.
CD burner.
CD
Yeah.
burner. Yeah.
K3B should barely even be in the full install, so it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah, because
I'm not totally disagreeing with
I
you.
agree with you.
but this is
I actually
2019.
forgot to mention that.
I can't remember
I'm
the
just-
last time I used
You know,
a CD.
Yeah, physical media.
All right.
I actually.
This
use
is
them
something I
as-
wanted
Tool
to.
should be in the repos, but it probably doesn't belong on the ISO.
I mean, as the default in the regular options,
It's
that's
fine
totally
as
fine.
default.
In the minimal is the problem because my opinion is that it shouldn't be in the minimal, and I gave them that day and they didn't really do. They disagreed. So I wanted some extra backup so I can go back to them and say, hey, here's all these people who don't think you should have it in the minimal.
Yeah, video evidence.
What is their reasoning for putting it in the minimal? Because if it's in there, they probably have a reason.
Because some people like to do CD burning and ripping and stuff. That's basically it.
Okay.
So you
I don't know.
install it
There
after
is
the fact.
Okay, that's not a good reason because the number of people that use that these days is so few because we've moved to digital and solid state. Why bother?
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
If you want to put it in there, put it in the regular ISO and leave it.
Well, yeah,
I
no,
thought
that's the point.
I thought the reason for minimal install was to have no apps. Is the
No,
minimal
essential apps only.
Right.
essentially
Yeah.
right? So does it still have Kmail and all that in the minimal
No,
install? Because
no.
because I don't really want that stuff. That's why I was thinking about trying it.
It has the basics of like a file browser. You know, it has Dolphin, it has Firefox, and it has stuff like that. And for every single example that is in the minimal ISO is essential, except for K3B.
Well,
So that's why I was asking.
It's pretty
Michael,
small. though,
I'm
okay.
trying to think about
It
it,
is
but
small.
when I've installed Ubuntu Mate, the more recent versions,
Mhm.
maybe since 1804, I don't think it's installed automatically on the full install. You have to go in because I don't install it on every laptop, but I only install it on those laptops that have a DVD drive in there, and that's like one. And I had to go in and install it. So I don't think like in Ubuntu Mate, it's no longer a default. It used to be as part of the default.
Right. I think Ubuntu Mate took out just in general. Like they don't even have an option. Period.
It's not
like
even on the full
Brasero,
install,
right?
is my thing.
Yeah, Brasero I think was the default, and now it's not even. That's not even there.
Right, that's not even, you have to install it specifically. Either one of those, you have to specifically install them.
Yeah, I think that's how it should be. Right.
Oh, I
It
agree.
could be in the default, sure, but just not in the minimal. But
Yeah, because
however.
it's just taking up space that you don't need. I mean, we're not talking much, but if you have a whole bunch of those,
It's annoying too if you. So let's say the majority of people don't use physical media anymore. The fact that it's there on every right click and things like that, where it's part of the context menus, it's part of the system, right? And it's at this point, and this could be like slightly elitist because maybe some of us are running better computers than other people, or whatever the reason is. I'm just
those people probably wouldn't pick minimal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
My concern with that as well is let's consider like because I know GNOME disks usually isn't installed in KDE, but in other distros, GTK-based distros, GNOME Disk Manager's usually installed. So you already have options to burn media or to mount media on right-click. So having another additional app on top of that is a little excessive.
Well, and that's true because K3B is really all about mastering the disk, not about just burning an ISO to a disk or something like that.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like a full suite, like if you have CDs.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a full suite.
It's
for,
awesome.
like music and data and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, back
It's
in the
a really
day,
good tool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing when you had to create CDs. It was a fantastic tool, but yeah,
and it's still one of
you
the
don't
best.
need it as
Yeah.
even part of a full install anymore. I mean, that's kind of a waste.
Well, I mean, in some cases, I would say that because Kubuntu is Ubuntu based and it's kind of like the beginner aspects to, using Qt applications or KDE applications, I think it's okay for it to be installed in the default because it's a lot of people are going to be, even if like there's people who are transitioning from Windows to Linux and are not going to have any idea what the software is called. There's
Right,
also people
that's
who are
true.
going from GTK desktops to Qt desktops and have no idea what the software is called because they're so different. So I think in that case, it's okay if it's there. But I was just wondering because basically, I just want to have fuel. But I think that Kubuntu is still, as far as paradigm goes, that was interesting because you talked about the paradigm. Isn't the paradigm of Ubuntu Budgie very similar to Kubuntu?
Yeah, I'll have. Well, it's got the Raven menu and stuff, which helps with sound and all that sort of thing. So I mean,
True.
But but also Kubuntu has the sound down the bottom. But
the best system tray ever. Just saying.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it has a good system tray. Yet, I think that the reason I don't use Plasma is because I've over the years used a lot of GNOME-based distros or GTK-based, and I'm so used to the applications.
Sure.
And they don't sort of. Yeah, you can, but I'm just so used to them in a GTK-based system.
You can use GTK-based applications in Plasma, and there's no issue because Plasma is actually taking in consideration the people that want to do that. The reverse is absolutely not true. GNOME does not care about Qt at all, so it looks like it looks terrible. But that's not because Qt applications are bad. Actually, Qt's a way better toolkit. It's because the desktop system don't care about making it work. Whereas there's specific GTK2 and GTK3 themes that are Breeze based, so that if you just install a GTK app, it'll look like it's supposed to be there.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I'll try them all and see how I go. Yeah. So
yeah.
Nice. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time because I could talk for at least 35 more minutes.
Yeah, but you're not going to because your 5 minutes is up there.
But, I have lots of things to say. I can give you multiple tips about how, like, if you know how when you right click on your desktop and you have the context menu, here's an extra tip. Just go into the right click configure desktop, then go into the options for the mouse section or like mouse tweaks, whatever. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Go into the middle button section, change that to application menu, and now when you middle click, it will it'll just give you a regular menu from your desktop like OpenBox does. There you go.
Middle click to paste. There, like you've said, there's some things that they have in default.
That's the worst thing ever.
I don't even understand it. Like, it was doing it to me one day, and I'm like, what is this pasting for?
That's not even a Plasma thing. That's a Linux thing.
It allows you to paste like notes on the desktop. So if you have like text in your clipboard, you can.
Do you do that?
No, but I just thought it was.
Yeah,
cool.
who does that? No one does that. The worst thing is you accidentally put a note on your desktop and go like, how do we get rid of this stupid thing?
Yeah. So there's stuff like that. Like, it's great that it can do it, and it's awesome. Like Michael said, you can map it to a bunch of different things, and if you want to have your system work like that, but some of those defaults where it just does something, you're like, what did I just do? So
yeah, but this is something that's not, most people didn't notice it, but go to any other Plasma desktop and open any application, and you'll see the icon next to the mouse just start bouncing for no reason, like a Jack Russell Terrier. Kubuntu changed it so it's just the image shows and then it goes away when it's done loading, and that's it. It's not just randomly bouncing like 1997 or whatever weird, wherever that came from. I have no idea why that's even there. But
you know what? I can still enable wobbly windows if I want them. So
yeah. Yes, wobbly windows are important.
I re-enabled them because I like them so much. I re-enabled them. It was after doing the Umix, I think they had a little wobbly window thing going on. I'm like, oh, I missed this. I'm gonna put it back on Plasma.
Nate, how about the desktop cube? I mean, come on.
KWin has a really good cube. So, it does. It can even turn into a sphere or a cylinder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got 5 more people to move on to. So
are you sure?
Thank you for
that.
I
can keep going.
No, you're perfectly okay.
You're stealing everyone's thunder, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be quiet now.
All right,
I see the gentleman from Tux Digital 2 of my minutes.
Awesome. Perfect.
Oh, hold up. We got Big Pod first.
Just start saying reclaiming my time.
Okay, so I didn't get to try Kubuntu this week, but because it's based on KDE, it can be that good either way. So, next.
Okay, well, Michael took your time.
You're entitled to your wrong opinion. It is totally fine. It's all right. Dave?
I installed it. I'm running on it right now. I like it. The thing I found most surprising was I had been setting it up for about 20-25 minutes before I realized that it had automatically scaled my high DPI monitors. And I hadn't had to touch the appearance. It all corrected to what was good default settings.
Does that actually work in KDE now? Automatic
Yeah.
scaling?
It did on mine, both monitors. It installed the NVIDIA drivers 418. I put in the graphics drivers PPA and updated to 430, and it got cranky on the 430s, but when I went back to the 418s, it ran just fine. I have not tried tweaking the drivers yet because it being Ubuntu, I know they tend to get a little cranky when you put in an xorg.conf file. So I've left them at default and it's been running fine. Haven't had any issues like that. I do have one weird thing is I have a dual monitor setup, and every time I log in, the login screen shows up on both. And the default one, when I hit the first letter, it comes up kind of like highlighted, and I have to hit it again for it to be solid. So I basically have to double hit each letter of my password. But if I manually put the cursor into the non-primary login screen, then I just have to type it once. And it's weird. It's a quirk. It may be my hardware. I have not taken the time to put it in as a bug report because, you know, it may be a feature, not a bug. And it's not
That's
something
not a feature.
It's not something that's actually interfering with the running or causing it to break or anything.
So your login screen shows up on both?
Yes.
Oh,
That's
okay.
actually supposed to happen. It's just
It is.
It's supposed to whatever your primary is supposed to be the one that works, and it's not. And that doesn't. You definitely have an issue, and I don't know. I don't have a suggestion for you, but
I also wasn't sure whether it was Plasma or what is it, SDDM that they use.
They use SDDM.
that's
Yeah, I'm
doing
sorry.
that.
Did I quite hear that right? Michael doesn't have a suggestion. What's going on?
Well, it's SDDM and not necessarily Plasma, so.
Yeah, it's pretty tightly integrated, but mine follows my mouse. So if I move from one screen to the other, then the login screen shows up. You know, the login prompt.
But anytime I use the primary as the login screen, it needs that double tap to make the little dots appear without a ghost shadow behind them. Where if I do it on the secondary screen, they just automatically come in with the first hit.
Strange.
It's weird, and I usually assume that such things are just my wonky hardware. But it's been running solid. Having used Plasma enough, it took me maybe 30 to 40 minutes to get everything set up, all the desktops I want, all the programs opening on the desktops I want them opening on, which is very nice. And it's Ubuntu based, which means it's solid and it just runs. So I have no issues with it. Like I said, I'm running it now and it's good.
Good.
Awesome.
Nice. Thank you, Dave. Steve.
No, he conceded 2 minutes to me.
No, he's fine.
He
No,
took him
he's
up.
fine. We'll come back to you
I'm just kidding.
just after 4 o'clock, okay? Yeah. Steve, you're up, my friend.
One.
Okay, you're a little bit quiet. You're even quieter now because you're not talking.
That's like extreme silence.
Yeah.
I'll fix it.
There we go.
So let's talk about Kubuntu.
Oh, much
I was
better.
going to say which Steve.
Yeah, no, that's Steve. Steve's very own. Yeah, no, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So me or
No,
Yeah,
no,
nope,
your
nope.
good self because you're next to Dave.
oh,
Well,
okay.
you are on my screen anyway.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. I haven't had a home cooked meal in 15 days. I've been on work, so I've been running back and forth cooking here. So, got to try it a little bit today. I'm on it right now. Michael took everything that I was going to say. No, no, I not much different than when I tried 1804. I could see a little bit things. It's the second now distro where I install the drivers that installed the NVIDIA drivers on my little test laptop here perfectly. I had no problems whatsoever. My one little niggle still is tap to click is not like a function right off the bat. And if you're installing it on a laptop, many people don't have mouse. And to get that to work is kind of a pain in the butt. Just a little niggle there. Otherwise, it installed pretty good. I haven't a whole lot of chance to play with it, but Zoom is going really well on it after I got it installed. That's about all I got tonight. I'll make it short since Michael took all the air.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. And the other Steve, welcome. How are you?
Hi, guys. Doing good. Is my mic high enough?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Actually, I did install Kubuntu. That I had high hopes, actually. Kubuntu 17.10 was the first distro that I installed on my hardware after I had taken a hiatus from Linux for about 7 years. I was a little disappointed in 17.10, so I moved to KDE Neon, and that was a little bit better experience. And then I found Ubuntu Mate and went whole hog for that and kind of stuck there. But I was actually looking forward to trying Kubuntu because I had tried OpenSUSE, the KDE version, with the desktop. And I had mentioned this on Telegram. I have a dual monitor set up on one of my computers, and I always have to run a startup script in order for that external monitor to be correctly identified. So I had to run a number of xend rand commands in order to get it to format the screen correctly and display the screen correctly. But for whatever reason, OpenSUSE KDE will pull the external monitor and see it correctly. So I thought it might have been a KWin thing, that it was the window compositor that was doing that. But I'm sure Kubuntu uses the same window compositor, so that's not the issue. So I do have to run the startup script under Kubuntu in order to get the screen to display properly. But like I said, I have to do that with every Ubuntu install and every other distro I've tried as well, except for KDE OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. So anyway, I don't know. I guess I am not much of a distro hopper, even a desktop hopper. I am very content with all of the Ubuntu flavors, whether it's Mate, Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Budgie was fine as well. I could live in any of them if I had to. I basically can use any of the desktops as well. It doesn't really make much difference to me. I mostly just leave them default and change the wallpaper, and that's about it. That's all I do to customize, so I'm not a huge customizer. I just like to get in there, have my Linux installed, and get to work, and it works just fine, all of them. So, and if Ubuntu Mate went away, I would probably go to Kubuntu.
Cool. Thank you very much indeed. Scott, you're up, my friend. How did you get on this week?
I actually missed out a little bit. I've been kind of buying stock in Samsung. So
oh, nice.
I can't even back up far enough for that.
What is that, 39 inch or so, or 40 inch?
It's a 50 inch super ultra wide.
50.
Yeah, Samsung. I love Samsung.
That's how it's done.
Well, yeah, haven't been able to play much with the software. I've just been setting up the system, and of course, definitely Team Red, and it just runs beautifully. Thanks, Mike.
Sweet.
Support there.
Haven't you got a curved Samsung chicken?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I plan on getting two more as well.
What size is yours?
Currently, it's I think it's a 24-inch 1440p monitor, but I plan on completing.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, not that we're measuring anything between males, but yeah, you're catching up.
No.
Okay, swiftly moving on, as Rocco would say. Aris, have you tried it this week? Cooey. Aris.
Didn't he go already once?
Yeah, he went already once.
Has he been on already?
Yes.
I think he went off and come back on.
Oh, he's trying to get. That's Michael should try that trick. No. I was only. No, that doesn't work because you didn't really go away. Well, it's interesting because obviously people are liking Kubuntu a lot, and I've not heard a lot of negative things about it. And we had one of the Telegram group users, Joel GJ, who normally comes on and has a chat with us. And he wanted me to mention a couple of things that he had noticed for Kubuntu. So he said, I noticed, and this was a weird one for me because I've never looked at it in this detail before. He said, I noticed a small issue during the install that the color key during the installation does not match the respective partitions, i.e. NTFS is green, but NYFS partitions on the map does not show green. I think he meant NTFS. So NTFS is meant to be green, but the NTFS partition didn't show up as green. And he said that factor makes it difficult when trying to limit a partition instead of an entire disk. So he got confused on that one. And now this is a really strange one as well, and I think it might be just his requirement. He wants reverse HIDPI. He's got a 720 monitor, and when he does drop downs from, let's say, an applet, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or the browser, it takes up like a sixth of the screen. The drop downs are way too massive. And how could he change that? Michael looked like he wants to interject.
I was just going to say he could change it by going to Craigslist, paying $10 and get a monitor that's not ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. There's kind of, there's only so many pixels you can draw things in that like is enough. Like if you've got a monitor that is essentially a Minecraft block, it's a little difficult.
Yeah, but his monitor's a 720p, so it can't be that small, surely.
Depending on the size.
A lot of laptops.
That is very. That's 1280 by 720. A regular laptop size is 1366 by 768, and it's smaller than that. So,
yeah, I guess. And then he goes on to say as well that he says Bluetooth is broken on KDE. He tried connecting his wireless headphones to the laptop, but the audio still comes out of the speakers. And I'm wondering, is that because he hasn't set it up in the speaker controls properly, or did he think it would automatically change over?
Yeah, you'd have to switch it. Probably use pulse audio control, or I mean, you should be able to do it from the volume control.
Would it not automatically connect?
It will connect, but it won't. Like, even if it does play through the Bluetooth, it will also play through the speakers, more than likely, depending on what the application is or depending on what you're trying to play.
Right, gotcha.
There's a toggle also that makes it switch automatically to the newest device too. That's also a toggle.
You can do that too. Yep. I think that probably the part that annoys me the most about Plasma is the audio setup, because there's times where I will set up an application to use a specific microphone or a specific speaker set, and it will just change it randomly for no apparent reason.
And it also changes the levels, which is annoying. Like it's, you set it to 80%, and for some reason, the next time you plug it in, it's 65.
Yeah, I've actually, when I was testing something for the live stream for This Week in Linux today, I was trying to test to see if they could hear the people in Discord. And for some reason, Discord, I never changed it, but for some reason it was at 35%. So there's issues like that. So as far as audio goes, I think the Bluetooth connection worked, but you have to check into the audio widget in the system tray, because there's some weird stuff in that, but I will admit. But the system tray is amazing, by the way. If you don't like certain icons to be on your system tray, you can right click, configure, hide the icons, and that way it goes in this little drop down overflow thing, and it makes it super smooth and clean. And yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some audio, like recording wise, there's some of the settings that are not in the system tray thing. So then you end up having to go into the pulse audio volume control. Sometimes you have to go there too.
Yeah, sure. So Joel G also noted that, I think he had a problem like Colin did with the Latte dock. He said, I had an issue with Latte dock where the dock gets bigger and the applets run into each other even when the dock is launched. So should it not auto size itself? The more apps you add to it, it just spreads along the bottom of the screen or wherever you got it?
Well, actually, the depending on how you set it up, if you have it to set where the dock will change, you can make the dock change, but you can also make it where it's as a set size for the dock, and then the icons will just adjust themselves based on fitting inside of that dock. So it depends on how you set it up. And by default, Latte dock is is you have to install LatteDock to get it in there, and it's really cool. I really love LatteDock, but the configurations issues, you're going to just have to, if there's any kind of issues with LatteDock, you need to contact them because the Kubuntu people don't provide that.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and he had one more negative, which I found quite unusual because it's never happened to me. He said you need to install restricted extras package in order to watch DRM content. Now, he is using the Vivaldi browser, so I don't know if it's anything to do with that. But
well, depending on so there's the issue. You don't necessarily need that package. You would need that package to watch like DRM DVDs, but not necessarily like stuff watching it on Netflix or something. That's a separate thing. I thought Vivaldi used Widevine from
Vivaldi should already have it. Yeah,
it should have it by default because of the Chromium structure, and using Chrome's Widevine inside of Vivaldi should work. And it's the same kind of thing that Firefox does. They don't use that, but they use a thing from Cisco. But if you want to do like Blu-ray discs or DVDs that have DRM on them, you would need that feature, but otherwise it's not necessary. And also in most cases, you could just use VLC or MPV and you don't even need those.
Colin, you mentioned you also had issues with LatteDock, like the auto starting issue, right? Or
it wouldn't. It kept starting, and I disabled it and all that, and just kept starting.
I think it's .auto start, or it's like .config/auto start. See if it actually removed the entry in there, because it might just not be removing the little.
Is that the name of the file? .config auto start.
I think it's .config/auto start.
There's also an option in system settings for auto start too.
I'll have to reinstall it because I uninstalled it to stop it from starting. So I'll check that out. Thanks, Chicken.
Cool. All right. Well, that sounds to be like we've all enjoyed our time with Kubuntu. Sorry, who was that?
Yeah, one more thing. Rocco actually told me what he wanted me to tell you guys about what he thought.
Oh yeah, please do.
He says, please let them know that Kubuntu is awesome, with the exception of having to make 4 confusing clicks to switch users. Which I'm sure Michael will have some reason why that's a thing.
I don't know the problem. So what is those tasks? The way I do it is easier. Because it's like if you hit Control Alt L, it goes to log out. So you just switch your user there, bam, done.
Yeah, don't know. It might be just a usability thing and or knowledge of the system. But it was interesting because he also had another problem with his father who just got a 4K screen. And no matter how much he changed the height of the bar along the bottom, your system icons all stayed really minuscule. And you have to go in and change some obscure file to put icon size equals 3, which is then you can like have 1 to 5. 1 is minuscule and 5 is gigantic, and then you can get your system tray icons to match the height of your taskbar along the bottom. And I can confirm that's true because I've got the 4K monitors, and you can drag the tray, you can drag the whole bar as tall as you want. But those little system tray icons stay minimal. But I know I always say it. This is what I love about our community. Yeah, Rocco had a problem, and within 5 minutes, 2 people had answered him and provided the solution. And that for me was just great. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For me, Kubuntu, it's easy. It just works. Next. So it was fine. I like it.
It's funny how sometimes you say next because you don't want to use it, and you say next to Kubuntu because it's too good and you don't want to use it because you want to try something else.
No, it just works. I've got nothing else to say. So next.
Yeah.
Well, normally I say if something just works, it's boring, but Kubuntu is not boring because you can explode windows, you can have wobbly windows.
It could never be boring because you could get lost for a week in the settings. But I'm lucky. I just change it to a dark theme and I'm done. I'm happy with the way it looks. So it's all good.
This is actually kind of funny because when I first started using Plasma, I was trying to get convinced by someone who had used it for years, and then they were like, "You should try this because this cool feature." Which, by the way, I will tell you what it is because it is a great feature. And it's the one that got me to go, okay, I'll try Plasma for like a legit a long amount of time. I said I'll give it a week. and the option he told me was, if you ever play a video game and that video game isn't doing properly on the full screen and has this weird artifacting and stuff, whatever. And I was like, yeah, it happens. And he's like, okay, in Plasma, you can say, put the game in window mode, which all games have the ability to do. And usually that does actually fix some issues like that, because the full screen rendering is different from the way the windows render. So you have full screen, and then you maximize the window, and then you have your window taking up the whole thing except for the whole border around it. But you can actually right-click the title bar at the top of a window and then go to the settings and remove the borders around it. So it becomes a fake full screen. And so you have the benefit of playing a full screen, but you don't have the negative of using that rendering type. And
hey, Michael,
yeah,
I can do this in Minecraft too. It's a little option in the launcher.
Well, okay. That's because of voxels, and that's purely the voxel part.
So that's just killed Michael's best Plasma feature that kept him on there for 5 years.
No. That was the first time I was like, okay, I'll try it, because that's an interesting thing that they have the ability to do that.
Trolled by Minecraft.
There's a ton of features. There's a ton of features that I could give you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about Plasma because I already have. So I will say the last thing I would want to point out is, actually I have like 7 things.
No,
so
one will
first,
do.
What?
One will do.
Okay. But I think that there's so many features in Plasma that it's definitely can be overwhelming for people. But once you spend time learning the stuff, you will be amazed of how many things and how much control and how well you can, and like just how well built it is, because you can make all these different changes and they will continue to work regardless of what it is, unless it's an audio thing. But for the most part, it's like 99% of the time it'll just keep going, however you set it. But it was kind of funny because when the guy who convinced me to try Plasma never put that much effort into learning all this stuff. So within like probably 6 months of him convincing me, he started asking me how to do stuff in Plasma. So there's always stuff to learn in Plasma. Like there's always stuff to learn in Linux, but there's always stuff to learn in Plasma too. So it's never boring because there's always new things to find.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I also would like to just say that for people that tried Plasma when it first came out, and I think you could say this for GNOME as well, for GNOME 3, right? I mean, improvements are always being made. It's just continuously being updated. 5.16 that's on the 19.10 that I'm playing with. There's lots of like really cool little things as a KDE user that I'm looking forward to. But Michael's right. The stability, the issues. I tried Plasma when it first came out. It was miserable, absolutely miserable. And you can go back and read the history of how that happened and why it happened and all of the missteps and all of that. But the truth is that if you haven't tried it in the last year or slightly longer, just give it a shot, because it's way more stable than it ever had been in the past.
100% agree.
GNOME's case, if you mean by removing things,
it's more stable that way. Yeah.
Then yeah, they nailed it.
Yeah.
Hey, for people who love it, it's faster now, right?
Well, yeah, but it's still the slowest.
All right then. Well, in true Rocco fashion, there isn't anybody here specifically from the Kubuntu team, so we would like to take the time out to say thank you very much for a solid release, superb bit of work, and continue with the good work, because it sounds like it's only going to get better and better. So big thumbs up for Kubuntu. So this is where Rocco would normally start chatting about other subjects, but Dan, you've got a couple of items you want to bring up with us this evening.
Yeah, so the first one that obviously is very, very out there is the Entregos is disappearing, and I mean, is this a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, how does everybody feel about that?
It's a great thing.
It's eventual. It's eventual. Every project will probably have a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Except for Linux Mint.
I'd say it's both. It's both because of how they're handling it. It's bad that it has to happen, because it had so much potential, and it still does. But it's good in the sense like the way that they are bowing out gives time for people to still use their software and it still be a solid base that people could fork it and make their own. Mm-hmm. And also the way that they're bowing out with the removal. So if you are a user of Entregos, you don't have to worry about your system crashing when they're done, because as soon as you're done, as soon as they're done, they're going to transition you to Arch. So I think I've never seen it before. So it's an interesting way that they're handling the transition. So I think it's both bad and good.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think it's really cool that they're doing. Oh, sorry, Zeb.
No, I was just going to say, when Dan first asked that question, surprisingly, someone said that this was a good reason. What was the reasons behind it was good?
We kind of need to thin the herd, as it were. There's too many distros, man, and there's too many Me Too distros. We just got to calm down with all that. To be honest, that's the way I see it. Like things like Intergos, really, another Arch-based distro. I'm fine with this.
Okay, Intergos
is more into me.
Intergos is one of the first ones.
Though, it was necessary because it was a good first step learning tool to get into Arch.
Mm-hmm.
There are others now, like Arco with Eric Dubois, that has is he up to 1,000 videos already or some such nonsense?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So the purpose that they created it for, that was very needed when they created it, isn't as needed as much anymore. And I think that they are looking to spend their time on their next project, and they feel that it's the Arch space is currently in a good spot, that it doesn't need, multiple easy entries anymore because they're already there.
Yeah.
And to be fair, also Intergos started in 2012-ish.
It's been around a while.
Yeah.
They were one of the first ones to do it. So the argument that there's too many Me Too, I agree with that. I just don't think Intergos could be classified as that.
This is where
they were actually innovative.
Yeah, but this is where I disagree. Everybody's talking about there's too much dissemination, there's too many distros, there's too many people having their own ideas. And I'll go back to something I said, and I can't remember whose stream it was I was talking on. Some people might not be comfortable going and working on Kubuntu, or going and working on Arch, and going on introducing bits and pieces to wherever. But they're more than happy to start their own distro. And if they ruin their own distro, all they've done is ruin it for themselves. They haven't gone along and submitted code that has maybe caused problems with elsewhere. And they might want to use their own distro to experiment and say, hey, actually, I'm quite good at this. I now feel comfortable. Let's go and chat to the guys at Arch. Let's go and chat to the guys at Kubuntu or wherever. And I'll go and help them now. So I never want to see people being stifled in wanting to produce their own spin.
That's right. The diversity and the variety is a huge benefit to everyone, because otherwise we end up with a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs.
No, it's a double-edged sword. So there's definitely a benefit to having the diversity and having all of the different variations. There is definitely a benefit, but there's also a negative. And the negative is there's a lot of distros that have no reason to exist, as in they change a theme here and there and new distro. You didn't do anything. And you didn't even make the theme that you put on the distro. There's no reason for this to exist. So then they have people where they're trying to promote that distro to get other people to use it, and then maybe someone does and they decide, I don't want to do this anymore, and then just abandon those people. That happens. This is not the case because they've been around for 7 years. So Intergos wouldn't be in that situation. And also they're not abandoning the users because they're giving a path to continuation. So this is an example of doing it, of ending a project gracefully and doing it right. But there are a lot of times where it's not done right. So I think that there is an argument that says, having the fragmentation is good, but also there is some negatives to it. And I don't think we should just say that all of these things are okay to exist. And I do think that it's good that people do it for their own purposes to learn. But once you start getting people to use it, that's where it goes to, you have to make sure that you are prepared to deal with it, and not just doing it for the sake of doing it. You actually have to have a end game for it, not a Avengers end game, but an event game at least.
And the guys on the User Error podcast actually brought up another interesting negative of the wide dispersal of distributions, in that one of the guys is in the open desktop standards issue, and the huge variety of distros. You have a lot of people who don't even know about the standards that Open Desktop is trying to get in place so that developers are more likely to look at Linux because they don't have to do things 18 different ways. They just basically develop for one base system, not necessarily one framework, because you're always going to have GTK and Qt, but basic standards on layouts and whatnot that are useful to hand to developers. And with a lot of the little distros that are out there, they don't even think to look at, you know, any of the standards that might be there for Open Desktop. And so they go off and do things in a totally different way. And when their users come to them and say, well, how do I do this? You know, and, you know, I can do it here. Why can't I do it in yours? Even though it's based on that. Well, we did it a different way, and you have to, you know, it only works in ours, and you have to learn, you know, an entirely separate system just for ours.
I think the point I was making with the whole Me Too distro thing and everything, I feel like desktop Linux lacks a certain focus and direction overall. And I know everybody has it's free software, it's open source. Anybody can take it and ruin it themselves if they want, and that's fine. But if we had like some kind of direction and some kind of like overall idea of what to do, then that'd be great. I think that would project the platform into the future quite well. But when, you know, a prospective developer outside of like enterprise stuff, you know, when someone's like, hey, I want to make a version for desktop Linux, which one of these like thousands of distros do I choose? Well, I guess I'll choose Ubuntu. It seems to be the most popular. And then it's like, well, why do the rest of these exist if everyone's just going to target Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch, and maybe SUSE? Like, it just, I feel like if we got rid of all the extra distros, and I'm not saying these developers have to work on that, they can work on whatever they want, that's fine. But if we were to try to create some kind of like standards around, and I know standards is like some horrible, like, oh, it's the government keeping me down word.
That's exactly what Open Desktop is.
Yeah, exactly. We need that, and we need the direction, but we can't have too many people doing it their own different way. Like, it's not compatible with moving forward. I mean, there are some ways, and many ways, in which proprietary platforms like Mac, Windows, mobile, whatever, are way ahead of desktop Linux simply because they don't have a million different people that they have to cater to in their different ways. One thing I said in Biddle and the Telegram chat was that we don't have the problem of too many chefs. We have the problem that nobody wants to eat each other's food. Like, we have a bunch of chefs cooking, and nobody wants to eat each other's food.
Yeah. Go on, Big Pod. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Big Pod, you've been holding your hand up for quite a while.
Oh. Yeah, I want to say that the problem with Linux, I see that there is a lot of duplication of effort, and that's a problem because like three distros do exactly the same thing, just maybe a little bit different team, and that's it. And that's a problem in my opinion, because if those three distros would pull the resources together, we could get a much better distro. Or even if only one of them did it and those two guys just helped, just gave input, it would be a much better distro anyway than three random guys doing, each one doing, let's say, a KDE Plasma based Arch.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, but if we had applied those things way back when, you wouldn't have Linux Mint, because that was just a green theme with codecs, and look where it is now.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful what you're saying no to.
Yeah, that's where I'll disagree and say that that's where taking source code from someone else and forking it or branching it or whatever, and you're not. I'm not necessarily. I don't think I can't consider that rehashing or redoing the same work. I think you're extending on someone else's ideas, and the best projects then feed back upstream and benefit everybody, right? Do I think that everybody has a right to do anything they want with free software? So if I want to make a distribution and I happen to publish it somewhere and someone happens to use it, there can't be any expectation that I'm now going to spend the rest of my life supporting that distribution. So I agree with Michael in this case. they're doing a very. I'm going to circle back to Energos because that's where we started this. They're doing this in a very responsible, compassionate way towards their users. They've said we have people who use this who like what we do. We can't continue to do it, so we're going to give them a way to keep going forward. And someone else is perfectly able to pick that up. And then the other thing I'll say about Energos, why I felt that it was important was if you didn't like how Manjaro has their own repositories, Antergos was very lightweight, and really what it gave you was a quick installer, and it let you pick whatever desktop environment you wanted. It was, especially when it came out 7 years ago, it was amazing. It may have been overshadowed recently by the popularity of other distributions, but it even to this day, I think it was a distribution that had merit, and it is a shame that it isn't going to be there as an option anymore.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not that clever. That comment about Mint was Mark Greaves in the chat, and he's got some other comments there if you need to catch up on what he's saying about why we don't necessarily agree that you shouldn't have all these diversities, because without these diversities you won't get other people's innovation, etc., etc. But yeah, I loved Antergos because it was, I found it a fantastic installer. Forget all the other fancy bits. I used to turn all those off. Just install it, for me, was the quickest way to get Arch, and it was really good.
Well, I agree with that.
Crap.
I agree with Adam in a way, with what Adam's saying is I agree with him, and I also agree with what Zeb said as well. I mean, I think we should have choose a Linux standard that can launch us forward into the future where we do have a standard, but you do need to have those on-the-side distros where people can learn about Linux. Like Zeb said, people may not feel comfortable coding with other people until they feel confident that they can do it. But having a Linux standard would be a very good thing as well. So, pick an environment and move forward with it. But so that becomes like something that everyone recognizes what Linux is about, but you also got those other ones where you can, once you get to know it, you can go and dip your feet in some other Linux distros that are different,
Yeah. Well,
So,
the kernel is the core. The kernel is the standard. It's the distro, the DE and the WE is all the wrapping. So you've already got the standardization in the kernel. Everything else is all about flavor.
Well, that's just a hardware layer anyway. So like there's a significant issue, and majority of the people who are looking into Linux are never going to understand the difference between the kernel Linux and the Linux as the operating system term and that stuff. But I think that it's a valid point. Both of these points are valid. Both sides are valid. It's just there's a level of where innovation is good, but also stuff is not innovation, because there are hundreds, maybe thousands of distros, and there's a large portion that are worthless. There's a lot of stuff that's also being done that's super interesting, like Nitrix is a very interesting distro because they are heavily focused on app images, not being done that much. That's very interesting. They created their own version of Plasma. Technically, they just kind of modified the shell, but essentially it is a huge change to the basic of Plasma. That's really interesting, and they're worth checking out. Yeah. And there's also other things like Manjaro is really interesting. They're doing a lot of custom stuff. They built a Mac and also all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, but interesting to you isn't interesting to everybody else. And to say that someone who had put their hard work into a distro and themed it to their liking, to say it's worthless is very harsh. That's denigrating someone's.
If you create a distro, when you theme it to your liking and you are keeping that for yourself, awesome.
Yep.
Good job. But if you're doing it for other people,
I guess what's
buy the distro, even creating a distro is for other people to use it, and that's where it goes into a complex problem of this is not. Just because you theme something doesn't make it a new distro, and doesn't mean you should be having a bunch of people use your system, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. And there's a lot of percentage that do that.
All right. So if you look at that, then Voyager shouldn't exist, because all Voyager is XFCE with his theming on top.
Yeah,
I mean, Voyager is an
something
awesome
that
distro.
somebody wanted. Each distro might have. I mean, Michael, made the point, and somebody, you're reiterating that is so somebody might take a fully functional distro and change one little aspect of it, but that might cater to a small fan base that says that's exactly what I needed. So diversity means that having even just those little changes gives you options, gives you choices, so that you might be able to home in on just the one you wanted with just the right options.
And so, what's the mark of success? How many people does it take to download that enjoy it, to actually say that distro is successful?
I don't know that it's a lot on what that developer is wanting to do. If they're just wanting to put it out there for just people to use, but they're just putting it out there as like a, hey, it's there if you want it, I don't care otherwise, one download would be considered a success. But if you're actually doing it to try to make changes and push them upstream and stuff like that, then it becomes a lot harder to define what a success would be. Like, okay,
usually popularity determines the success of something. So whether it's paid for doesn't matter, but popularity does.
And Big Pod, just jump in, mate. You're going to be there all night long.
Yeah, go ahead, Big Pod.
To say what Chris Titus says, distros don't matter because you can do everything with any distro.
Yeah.
And that's even more true now.
Just a package manager, nothing else. Most distros, you actually just choosing between a package manager and a team of what that someone else made, which you can either download or recreate yourself. So distros don't really matter. In most cases, most people will use some base one, and they can get anything.
Yeah, but that's for me. That has been said by somebody who's very technical. Yeah, you could not give me a base distro and then ask me to set up my own Kubuntu or my own Xubuntu or my own Lubuntu, because I don't have that knowledge of what goes together, how it all hooks in. That's why I never use Arch on its own. I can install Arch, and then I've got this nothing little box that does a few bits and pieces, but Pulse Audio isn't integrated, the window manager isn't integrated, all the themes aren't integrated. So for me, distros are vital for me to try different aspects of Linux. So to say that distros are pointless, I'm sorry, Chris Titus, don't know how big you are on YouTube, mate, but you're wrong in so many ways.
I would agree with that. I mean, there's also things where people like just having DE's options, like just having flavors of the existing distro is a significant benefit to people who don't know how to set up those stuff or don't know how to install various different packages, or don't even know what the packages are called in some cases. So it's not fair to, like, is it fundamentally technically the same? Yeah, they're all very, very, very similar. So yes, that's true. But to say that means that nothing matters, that the distros don't matter, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. So bringing us back round to the Antigos theme, there was something else that I wanted to touch on. So Antigos has gone, Scientific Linux has gone, and there was another one that disappeared recently. And as soon as that happened, the press goes, "Oh, woe is me, Linux is in turmoil, it's the end of days," and all the rest of it. How do we stop all that nonsense? How can we counter that?
That was really, really heavy-handed on beta news. That is also funny because just like 2 weeks prior, the same person who wrote this one also wrote about abandon Windows XP for this, or abandon Windows 7 for this, or whatever. It's like, and it's super heavy for Linux, and it's like, why are you? It's like a weird like switch that it just went from just because this one distro that is not a mainstream distro in the sense of millions of people, just because it went away doesn't mean it's going to just the end is nigh. Like, it's just weird that they did that. But
sensational reporting. That's the point. Getting clicks.
Linux is fake news.
I think a lot of it is also people in the media don't understand just how prevalent Linux is, and how if one distro dies, it's not going to impact the Linux community as a whole.
Well, this individual has been writing about Linux for a very long time. There's no excuse other than clickbait.
Okay, for them it's clickbait, but a lot of the other people that are writing about Linux, because I've seen like 3 or 4 different articles that were similar to what you're talking about, saying that Linux is getting ready to start suffering really bad because of that. Honestly, I don't think they really understand that there are so many distros out there that 1 or 2 or 3 dying isn't going to hurt us. I don't think they understand that because Linux is open sourced and because it has such a huge fan base, if something were to happen overnight and all the distros that are out right now just stopped, but the code base still existed, it would start over. We would have new distros coming out after that.
Yeah, you could say the exact same thing about Linux itself. Like just the kernel itself. If for some reason the kernel went away, the code is available and they would just make a new one. So,
right. It's like Y2K was the end of the world. You know, it's just the same thing with Antigos. Y2K even gone.
Well, the Y2K thing was actually had some semblance of reality to it because like they had to change a ton of different things to get it to work. But
yeah,
the point is valid.
When it comes to Linux as a desktop platform for users and stuff, and not like enterprise, a lot of people have the misconception that Linux is suffering in situations like this, or Linux is going down the drain. The thing is, we've never had it better. And I know I've only been around for a few years, but we've got big companies like Microsoft developing Skype, like specifically for Linux, in packages for Linux, and not just snaps, in multiple formats. We've got companies like Discord, Steam. We've got all of these things that otherwise, really, why would they have interest in our platform, that are supporting us and working with us, even if they're proprietary?
And
this ain't the days of Slackware, boys and girls.
I would also argue that Linux distros don't actually die; they just change form. So Antigos, example of it too, is they actually. It's now merging back into the MX Linux is a good example too. They're just merging back into Arch. It's not. It didn't. It's maybe like a side street, but it just came right back on the highway. So it's not like it was. It didn't really die though.
Still exist.
Yeah, and also even that point, there's already some people working on a fork to make a new Antergos. So like it's not going to be called Antergos, but they are working on like forking Cinchi and making and like kind of continuing what the point of our Antergos was under a new name. So that's already being done too. So you had the benefit of, instead of actually when one dies, 2 emerge.
But
I'm going to throw out there. Go ahead, Thomas.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Thomas.
Okay. Thing is, a lot of a distro can still die though. Like if Draugr OS were to die today, I do not have a large enough fan base that it would continue on. Like I have people who are helping.
They stop using Linux though.
No, they would probably not stop using Linux.
They were offering. Right. So they didn't really die.
Right. It would slowly fade out because it would be supported technically upstream from Canonical as long as Ubuntu 18.04 supported.
But Thomas, here's what small distros do. Let's say you create a tool set, or there's something you contribute, or an idea where you innovate. Upstream distros or other distros can adopt those things, and in that way, technically, Draugr OS never dies because it's an idea that you had that you brought forward, exactly. And other people found a value in and was able. Like you see it with the installers, you see there's a lot of sharing going on across, and somebody innovated somewhere at some point, whether it was a small idea that became a bigger idea. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, I don't think they ever really die if there was any merit, like maybe to Michael's point, if they were doing something interesting, if there was some, Nitrix, it never really goes anywhere, but the idea of what they've been doing with Plasma is interesting. And somehow the KDE team thinks, wow, this might actually work for us.
And so we'll take some of it, yeah. But what I find interesting now, though, is it because Linux is becoming much more used? Because think back a couple of years ago, yeah, Chalet OS died. There was another Debian distribution that just disappeared and went away. And I think there were maybe 2 or 3 from sort of like the 2014 era that went away, but we wasn't having all this doom and gloom in the media. Is it because we are that much more popular that they think they can get away with these clickbait articles now?
I think it's twofold. One, I think, yes, it is absolutely that, but also Antergos was a really big name. Like it in terms of distributions in terms of like maybe companies or whatever, it was not that big. But in terms of clout and attention that it got in the community, it was really big. So even people who didn't know anything about Linux at all would have maybe have heard of that term and have no idea what it is, but they might have heard of it.
Antergos got coverage from podcasts like User Error, Linux Action News show.
That was well known.
Linux Unplugged, things like that, which people listen to all the time, especially when they're newer to Linux, because they want to learn more about it. Typically, they want to know what they're doing, what they're getting into, and it's mentioned all over the place. I found out about it back when Rob and Rocco were still making videos together.
Well, and it shows you how two people, right? I mean, that's what we're saying here is that two people decided they don't want to continue doing this. And so now that is that distribution bowing out. It was well known and maybe slightly supported by a community, but really those two people had that much of an impact, right? And that's pretty cool.
Well, it's like the developer for the Tilix terminal has said that he wants to go on to other projects and he's looking for somebody to take it over. One person put out one of the most popular terminal apps in Linux to date. And he's just like, well, okay, it's reached the point where I want to work on other stuff. If there's anybody that wants to take this over, please get in touch with me. I will gladly hand it off.
And again, I think that's a graceful transition, much like Antergos.
Yeah.
I've tried a distro out there that was very similar to Antergos a while back. I cannot remember the name of it.
It might be called Antergos, as some people call it.
No, there was a distro that was, I cannot remember its name, but when I used it, it was very similar to in the way that Antergos works. So I don't know what the name of it was. So I don't know if that's
There's Archmerge, Arco Linux, Architect,
Archman.
Arco would be the closest.
But they don't have the same installer though, do they? This one was using the Cinchi installer as well. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it was using Cinchi as well. Cinchi is pretty unique.
Yeah, there was another one using Cinchi. I'm damn sure of it.
Architect is a spin-off from the community based on I think the Antergos like unofficial, like unsupported ones. So they would be using the same installer the last time I checked.
Right.
All right. Well, just to bring us back to a subject that was touched on earlier when we were talking about a Linux standard, I'm assuming that that's going to be applying to everything desktop related, Linux related, applications related. And Dan, I noticed you spotted another article about please don't theme our apps. What was that all about?
So I'm not sure where it came about, but certainly it's a plea to the GNOME community. I don't know if GNOME actually published this or not.
GNOME app devs, yeah.
Yeah, they did. Okay.
It's not necessarily GNOME shell developers or GNOME developers, but the people who are a part of GNOME who make apps. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So they're asking that the desktop environments don't theme their apps. So what do we all think of that?
Ridiculous.
Go on, Chicken.
Can I add a correction? It's not that they don't want desktops theming the apps. It's they don't want distributions creating themes that like globally just retheme every app that's installed. Right. So like it's more so that like
they're talking about theming the apps because they even go as far as to say don't change the icons or anything. So they're talking about changing.
But these are changes made by distributions, not like the desktop themselves.
But not the. I think it's distributions is the main thing that they were doing it for. But the distribution issue is like most of these applications have terrible defaults. So whatever.
Again, that's just your subjective viewpoint on it.
I'm just saying, like, there's sometimes there's definitely a few applications that have icons that are just atrocious, and there's not a single reason to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And also the inconsistency of these. So these icons don't fit. So that people use icon sets because they look nice because they're consistent.
Yeah.
And they like in just the shape that they are, and they just like they could still look like the same application, still the same brand, but just do like an interesting
approach to it and a nice consistent design, and it's much better.
The only thing I found about this was, okay, they don't want you to mess with the way they've designed their application, but then you'll have 20 different applications written by 20 different people looking 20 different ways, and it won't look as good as elementary can, because elementary have that standard, don't they?
This is already a problem.
Yep. That's why if we had a standard, which is what elementary does, then everyone can stick to that standard. They work within what would you say?
The framework
a typical,
or whatever.
A framework or whatever that, and then people, then maybe they can ship with certain, what can you say, themes that people can just ship the theme with the distro, but people can choose to change it. Is that what they're talking about, or?
No, it's like, for example, Solus changes the theme by default. So like all the applications use Arc Dark or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's they're talking about that. So shipping an application with a pre-modified design to, rather than having the like whatever came with the application. That's the problem.
So what are we supposed to use at Wader? Are we all supposed to use at Wader?
You're supposed to use whatever they give you.
So just to draw clarification here, there's even a big yellow box at the top of the letter, is that this is specifically targeted towards distributions who are shipping this out by default, not you as a user who is free to make those changes and not discouraged from doing so.
Right. And
except for the fact that they also say, if you make these changes and they break, we're not going to support you.
Which is
that's the practical problem, right? The practical issue is that as a developer, you are designing the UI the way that you feel like it should be laid out, and if you get some kind of crazy theme that just blows that apart, I agree with that. You know, I don't want to support that. Like if you came to me and said, well, now everything's, you know, out of proportion, or it's got scroll bars or something, I'm just going to say, well, because I'm developing it to a standard. So I agree with that component of it, but I should also be able, as long as I can retain the ability as a user to find a well-formed, well-created theme and an icon set that has all the icons that need to be there to represent properly, and I can change that myself, I'm cool with it. I get it. I understand both sides, but just don't take away my ability to change that theme, as Zeb says, to be able to integrate it all to make it look good, because otherwise it's just like, it makes me think of like Windows, where every application just does whatever it wants and nothing looks like it belongs together. And one of the appeals I think a lot of people see in the desktop environments that we use on Linux is that cohesive component where everything sort of matches.
You're one of those people that tears the tags off your mattress, aren't you?
So
I'll tear yours
who
off.
develops the standard, I guess, right? I mean, that's a question. I mean, does the distributions
that's what the Open Desktop Project has been trying to do for years, is to get consensus, to get those standards, you know, not hard and fast, but generally accepted across most of the distributions.
And that's fine. And so you look at it. Sorry, go ahead.
Will no maps conform to that, you think?
Well, no maps already, typically most no maps already do follow Adwaita. Like most of them are already.
Yeah, they follow their own standard. They don't follow an actual standard. They follow their own standard.
Right. But who's supposed to create this?
They are no maps. Like if they weren't no maps and they they did whatever they want, it would kind of make sense because they're not following that. But most no maps already are targeting Adwaita. So like that kind of like, they're just all going to look really crazy. Keep in mind, GNOME apps written by GNOME developers or GNOME app developers, like it's not like they're going to be all crazy and scattered because they're already targeting one thing. It's everybody else that's changing.
But they're also inconsistent to their own guidelines. Like they do the whole CSD thing where like, well, the developer chooses where the buttons go and all this other stuff, and they're all different.
So there are some other downsides because you're not forced to abide specifically by those sets because creativity or something.
Sure, but the whole point is that the fact that they have a standard that they all are trying to be consistent and they're not consistent. Like they're telling people don't change our stuff when they don't even have a consistency amongst themselves. Why should we not change it?
you make a good point, Mike, and chicken too. But the problem is, a good comparison is if the government said to all car manufacturers, okay, all you guys have to make the same color car and the same shape car for cars. You have to make all the trucks the same color and the same shape for trucks. You know, you can't do that because people aren't going to be happy with that. They want their choice. They want their variety. And there's no nod to the developer. All right. So a developer creates an app. You've got his icon. There's a nod to keep it that way. If you start changing developers' icons just to match a set by another company that made this, it's just a mess to try and even do that.
No, because I'm talking about, like, for example, Numix would take someone's icon and turn it into a flat design. It's still the same icon. It's still, like, for example, transmission. It's still transmission. It's just a flat design of transmission icon. You still tell what it is. So it's not like changing its brand. It's just changing the style of how it's made. And in some cases, a lot of these icons are way better than the defaults for GNOME applications, and like to a ridiculous degree. And even with the new versions of their new icon set from GNOME, it's still not very good.
On a similar note, though, like the Google logo still looked like it did 10 years ago. That'd be pretty significant difference too. It's just like a flat style now, but it's still the same. It's still Google, like.
Yeah,
but
you can modify something and not change what is the essence of that thing.
Yeah.
No, that's true. It's still got the same color theme, but sometimes it's round, sometimes it's square, sometimes it's something else.
But if somebody like came out and like shipped something like that out with like the old style or whatever, like everybody would hate them because it's terrible and it looks bad.
So my question is, when let's just say Ubuntu, for example, when they released their 1910 and they decided to stick to what they're asking for, so they wouldn't have the Yaru theme. They wouldn't have the new theme that they've just put. I can't remember the name of the other one, but there's Yaru, I think, is the icons, and the other one is the theming.
Yaru's the theme, Suru are the icons.
Suru, that's right. So they wouldn't have that. They would have whatever Adwaita is. Is that what they're talking about? So is that
some extent?
Is that basically? Yeah.
I think part of the issue is that this is such a global application that even things that aren't installed on the ISO, when they get installed, are automatically forced to adapt to this theme, which can cause usability issues because the things that typically aren't installed aren't properly tested with those themes.
Well, the problem is really GTK.
That's fair.
Because GTK is the one that if you don't test it with GTK and those themes, that's why it breaks. If you use Qt, no problem.
Right.
Well, let's not go there, eh?
As a user, I'd still be able to download a theme from GNOME Look and install it and change it, but some apps may not look right. Is that if they stuck to a standard? Would that be?
Yes, but they're more complaining about distros. Let's say, for example, Ubuntu. They have the Suru and Yaru theme. They want Ubuntu to just default GNOME. They want Solus to ship default GNOME, and they want Fedora to ship default GNOME. So they want them all to be the same. But
which would be Adwaita, right?
Not particularly the shell, but like the themes that apply to the app. So like, I don't think they're discouraging the shell from being reconfigured or anything like that, but rather
technically they're talking about just the apps, but even GNOME, you have to install an extension just to change the shell.
Yeah.
So they don't really want you to do that anyway.
I mean,
it's basically, hey, do what we want you to do and like it.
With Ubuntu in particular, I don't think it really matters if they just don't do that, because Ubuntu only covers like first-party, essentially pre-installed apps anyway. So anything you install after that automatically looks like garbage anyway. But if you're using your own theme, or like Papyrus or whatever Solus does with what is it called now, like Yellow Bird or like Dark Blackness of Death, something like that. It's really dark.
It's totally that one.
Covers everything. I think with more kind of complete themes, it's something that doesn't look too bad, and I don't think is as harmful as something that's just kind of haphazardly done and ruins like contrast on text and things. Like there's very clear examples of where it's done very poorly, which should probably be fixed before shipping. But there's also examples of it being done very well, which...
Well, my question is, if everyone's changing the themes to look better then why aren't they making a standard theme for GNOME that looks nice rather than everyone having to change it? Wouldn't that be the answer? Put something in that looks nice in the first place that people don't have to change.
Yeah, but what's nice? Pink, blue, green, purple, orange, black,
that's so
yellow.
subjective. And I'll also say that one of the biggest complaints was the icons themselves. They've modernized the Adwaita icons. I'm not going to say they're perfect, but they're definitely better than they were.
They're better than they were because they were absolute trash.
Yeah.
Now they're just pretty. They're okay. They're not necessarily bad.
They're functional.
But it's
I'm not gonna.
It's also
the other thing you need
I
to
don't hate the
remember
new
is
ones.
that
I just don't. I think they're inconsistent, and that's what that's a negative.
Theming,
I think part of the problem is, though, the GNOME developers, they're not looking at aesthetics. They're looking at workflow. That's where their priority lies. So they don't worry as much about the theming. They worry more about what is it, UX instead of the UI.
That's true.
But theming is so just subjective. One of the most stupid things that I hear about Peppermint is they say it's ugly. How can you say Peppermint is ugly?
It's
Easy,
not ugly.
because you don't like it.
I made a comment in there. Mark and the team does a real nice job, but I change it because it's Pep, but it's my Pep.
That's right.
That's a totally reasonable thing. I'm just saying that the original icons for the Adwaita and GNOME icons before like the past few months when they made a new change, those were absolutely bad. Like they were terrible icons. They were inconsistent. They were some were flat, some were 3D, some were like super ridiculous 3D. Like there was no consistency whatsoever. They still don't have consistency, but at least it's like they improved some of the designs. So it's a mediocre icon set when it used to be terrible. So in the sense of like just subjective, yes, there is a level when it goes from literally anytime whoever ships your desktop environment changes the icons by default because they're so bad, that's a sign that they are actually bad icons.
Yeah.
And when I say nice, Zeb, I know it's all subjective and all that as well, but I'm just saying surely they could have a look at a few distros out there and say, well, this seems to be something that's used commonly. Maybe we should use that. At least people seem to think that that's okay. Right, in general.
So again, where are they getting that metric from? When was the last time you saw a poll where people said Ubuntu's default theme is good, Kubuntu's default theme is good? You're never going to get these types of metrics because it's almost
you can just
impossible.
look at the fact that people are like praising it and showing it off, and then look at the fact that nobody's showing off because they're ashamed of how awful it is.
Yeah, I guess you could say that's true of Elementary, because whether you like Elementary or not, it is gorgeous.
Yep.
So
I would have to. I don't like the fact that it's all bright and super bright and there's no option.
It's the gear, Michael. It's the gear.
I do hate that gear. I do hate that gear.
I'm sorry. I
literally just give Elementary a dark theme, and it is amazing.
Overall, I think it's a solid.
They're working on it
for sure.
They're not working on a dark theme. They're working on a dark preference, but the whole goal is that it helps the entire desktop platform, not just like Elementary. So the goal is to actually implement a standard that like allows dark preference to be something that the user like enables, and it actually like signals to apps that they should implement a dark theme, but not in a way that just kind of forces some global style sheet to like override everything.
Because it sounds like the GNOME app developers are going to hate them.
They might, but the good thing is it allows like this app not to look terrible, like with messed up contrast. When you have a dark theme, you need proper contrast. You need buttons that don't look like
also,
buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Accurate.
But also target so that websites will actually follow a darker theme too, because that was also what Mr. Foray was talking about.
Like, this is good stuff. This is the juicy tender bits.
That is not likely to happen.
All right, gentlemen. Well, a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure we could carry on for hours, but we are unfortunately reaching the 2-hour time. So,
but Rocco's not here. We can change it up, man.
Everybody, no, I've got to go to bed, son. Everybody can get a last word.
Sorry to interrupt, Zeb.
You go on.
What's our distro for next week? Is it standard Ubuntu? We haven't picked that yet.
Very, very
Correct.
good point, Colin. Thank you very much indeed. So yeah, Ubuntu or however you want to pronounce it, the king of Ubuntus is the distro for the challenge next week. And now I know lots of people are going to say, "Oh well, we've done every other Ubuntu and everything's based upon Ubuntu. So why should we bother?" Well, because we started and we're going to finish. We're not going to do Kylin because none of us here speak Chinese. At least I don't think any of us do. So yeah, Ubuntu is going to be the distro of next week, and then we can choose something else after that.
Sure.
Is that all okay?
Good. Yep. Okay. Sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah, because that's got GTK apps.
Accurate.
What flavor are we doing?
Shame.
That butchered GNOME desktop called Ubuntu proper.
The regular Ubuntu.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's the only GNOME that's any good as far as I'm concerned.
Valid.
All right then. So let's get that round to the last words. Adam.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having a good discussion. Didn't mean to stir the pot earlier, but it happens. So yeah, thanks for having me and good times.
It's all good. Dan, last words.
I want to give a big shout out to Zeb for taking the helm here and running with it. He's done an excellent job. And thanks Adam for stirring the pot. I think that's makes for a good show. So don't apologize for that.
Yeah, 100%. That's the whole point of the show. If we all thought the same, wouldn't it be boring?
Yep. And thanks to everybody for showing up and sharing in this virtual log.
Cool. Chris, last words, my friend.
Okay, well, thank you much for hosting Zeb, and thank you, Dan, for filling in for the co-host. And I don't think we're going to die anytime soon. There's just too much support in the communities to keep things going to die out. It may not be what we're recognizing now, but I think Linux on the desktop is going to show up, and it's going to. I think it's going to shine soon, maybe. Anyway, everybody in the U.S. have a happy Memorial Day, and which is really kind of a oxymoron. But have a good long weekend for people in the U.S. and everybody stay safe.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Chris. Nate, last words.
Hey, thanks for hosting this. Uncle Zebedee, Boss Linux. And Adam, thank you for stirring the pot. I appreciate you doing that, actually. I think it makes for good discussion. So thank you, Adam. And I appreciate everyone for being here. And although I've had very few shenanigans as of late on my site, you can see me at tuxdigital.com/cubiclenate for anything else that I might have written. So thanks again.
Thank you. Vash, are you there? Yep, last words, my friend.
Well, thanks for the episode, and I guess we have to work on changing those initials, BZLL, I guess. Now. But see you guys hopefully next week here.
Cool. Tony, last words.
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you, Zeb, for running it this week so that we didn't miss out. The discussion was lively, which makes it more interesting than some weeks. And I just want to finish off by saying tuxdigital.com/whatever, because we haven't heard that for a while.
Nice.
All right, Eric, last words, my friend.
Thanks to Zeb and Dan for hosting and putting this on. I'll say it for you, Zeb, highlight of my week. It always is. Great to see everybody. Thanks to the Kubuntu devs for their continued efforts and providing me with my perfect desktop. And I will see everybody next week.
Colin, last words.
Uncle Zeb, is that a thing?
I hope not.
Anyway, thanks, Zeb. Love your work, and Dan for backing him up today. So great stuff. Looking forward to trying Ubuntu. I think the first thing I'm going to do is maybe change the theme to Adwaita.
There's only one.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to a little bit of fun this week. But no, it should be good. So
Nice.
Thanks very much.
You're more than welcome. Shikin, last words.
Well, good things are happening in the land of themeless wonder. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys on the other side.
Thank you, Michael. Last words.
All right. So I'm glad to be a part of Big Zebby Linux Live, and so this actually go check out the Destination Linux tomorrow. We're gonna have it in a new episode coming next week. And if you haven't checked it out, check out the interview with Richard Brown, the chairman of OpenSUSE. It was a really interesting interview. Definitely worth checking out. And especially there was a lot of good parts from Uncle Zeb on that episode as well.
Thank you. I'm never going to live this down, am I? Big Pod, over to you.
Next week we have my favorite version of Ubuntu, so I'm happy. And thank you, Zeb, for being the host on this episode, and thank you all for watching us.
Cool, thank you. Dave, last words.
Thank you, Zeb and Dan, for another great show. And as much as we are doing Ubuntu next week, I gotta say, single click Plasma for the win.
Someone had to mention it. It was amazing.
There's always
that no
one.
one did.
There's always one.
Everything.
Steve, last words.
There was no doubt, Zeb, you were going to do well tonight because we all know that you're the driving force behind Destination Linux. The other three are just eye candy.
I can't. Okay, how dare you? Yet I can't really deny the eye candy part.
Wow.
Eye candy or eye candy?
I mean, kind of both.
Your choice.
Oh, what a classic.
Nice one, Steve. Okay, Scott. Over to Scott. Yeah. Last words.
All right. Yeah, I'll go ahead and stick to the theme. Zeb, way to squeeze into Rocco's left shoe. Dan, way to squeeze into Rocco's right shoe. Good job. And everybody have a safe Memorial Day weekend. A salute to all those who've given the ultimate sacrifice. And although I didn't get to test this last distro go around, and I'm still testing out and enjoying my Samsung 50-inch, we'll go ahead and give the Ubuntu a try in a virtual box for this next one. And we'll see you guys in the next week.
Lovely. Thanks very much indeed. Aris, last words.
Thank you for the stream tonight, especially tonight, ZBL. And see you next week.
Thank you very much indeed. Thomas, last words, and I'm hoping it's going to include you telling everybody about your new distro.
Yes, it will. So sorry I didn't say much this time because I was up till 4 a.m. uploading the new release of Draugr OS after 6 months of beta testing. But
Yay.
yeah, great job, Zev. Thank you for doing what Rocco does every week. You did fantastic, of course, as you obviously would. Go check out Draugr OS at draugros.org. I promise you 7.4.1, our latest release, is miles ahead of our last version. I love it.
Love it.
Is it out of beta? Did you drop their full one?
Yep, this is the stable release.
Excellent, because I've been looking through the week and I hadn't seen it, but I hadn't looked in like 2 days. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what's the code name for that? Jiangxi or something? Or?
Jiangxi.
Jiangxi.
Yeah, look it up. It's on Wikipedia. It's a hopping vampire from China.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah.
Because a Draugr is an undead zombie type thing, all of the code names are undead, just so you know.
Right. Okay.
Or some
Cool.
form of horror monster thing.
Well,
So
congratulations
when is it going to
on
be
that.
Eddie Munster?
Yeah.
I don't know
Congratulations
about
on
that
that,
one.
Thomas, and I hope you get lots of downloads and lots of feedback on it.
Well,
So-
thank you very much.
I'd just like to finish up by saying thank you very much, everybody, for joining this week. And as Eric has already pointed out, it is the highlight of the week. And just so that everybody knows, there's absolutely no way that I could fill Rocco's shoes. So thankfully, he'll be back next week for another Big Daddy Linux Live. I've just literally hosted it for him today, so it's still the Big Daddy Live show. And long live Linux.
Later, everybody.
Night all.
See you later.
Live long and prosper.